Hey, what is going on guys? RZ Stealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different here. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the worst champions for Season 9. Now, just a little disclaimer, you can climb with every single champion in the game if you put the time into them. These are the champions that, in my opinion, are going to take you the longest to climb with though, or these are the champions that it's going to be the hardest for you to climb with due to the fact that they are some of the weakest in the game right now. Now, before we get started, this video is going to be sponsored by Camelot. So the idea behind Camelot here is for you guys to be able to interact a lot more with the content I make and for you guys to be able to influence what kind of content I make for the channel. So when you do come to my Camelot page, you can create a bounty, and by creating a bounty, you can tell me what kind of content you want to see. So for example, if you want to see me make a video on the most OP champions for low elo in Season 9, you can do that. If you want to see me make a video on the best champions for multi-kills, you can do that as well. So there's just endless possibilities of what kind of bounties you guys can create for me. You can also add to other bounties that are on the page. So right now, if you want to see me make a video of the all-time OP champions, you can add to that bounty, and once we hit the goal, I will create the content. I'm also going to be running my coaching from this page, so there's a $20 and a $30 option there for coaching. When you do make bounties, you're also going to show up on the leaderboard here, so it's going to show your amount paid, and it's also going to give you loyalty points. So there is going to be a link down below for you guys to check out my Camelot page. If you do have any questions about it, then you can contact myself on my Discord, or you can also contact Camelot directly on their Discord as well. So taking home the number 10 spot for this video is going to be Xayah. Now Xayah is sitting at pretty much the bottom of the barrel for AD carry champions right now, and she's been a very weak AD carry pick for just multiple months in a row for solo queue. Now this mainly stems back to when the crit item changes went through a while back, when Essence Reaver got changed to where they removed the CDR, they removed the crit, and they also removed how you got mana back. That just really hit Xayah harder than pretty much any other AD carry in the game. Xayah is an AD carry pick who relies on CDR and relies on getting mana back a lot more than most of the other AD carries, and because you just can't use the new Essence Reaver on Xayah, the fact that the ultimate synergy, or Xayah's ultimate synergy with the passive on Essence Reaver just is not very good, makes it a pretty bad item for her to pick up. When you take into consideration that a lot of other AD carries have actually been getting some meaningful buffs over the past few patches as well, like almost every single AD carry has got a pretty good buff over the past few patches, whereas Xayah, she got one little buff in this patch that increased the stun duration on her E by only 0.25 seconds, so that buff doesn't really mean anything at all. And then also, if you factor in that Rakan just is a pretty bad pick right now in the current meta as well, things just don't look very good for Xayah for Season 9. So at the number 9 spot here is going to be mid lane Victor. Now I just really feel for mid lane Victor players, because when top lane Victor became meta and when they started to nerf top lane Victor, they tried to compensate to buff mid lane Victor, but what they ended up doing was just making mid lane Victor's laning phase even weaker than it already was. They ended up giving him buffs to his mid to late game, to his AP ratios, and that doesn't do anything for Victor because his weakest point in the game is his early to mid game, and you're basically not even a champion right now as Victor until you reach 2 to 3 items, and his ultimate is also just such an unreliable ability. It just moves so slowly with all the gap closers in the game right now. It's basically not even an ability. Victor almost doesn't have an ultimate, especially if the enemy team has a lot of gap closers. So right now he's just in a pretty bad spot, and I don't think he was in a terrible spot before he ended up getting those nerfs targeted to top lane, but after those nerfs came in and after his early game just got nerfed even harder, he's just a pretty bad pick right now. So at the number 8 spot here is going to be Gnar, and Gnar is pretty bad right now for a few different reasons. So number 1 is that his solo queue matchups against some of the most played champions are just very bad right now. Gnar tends to struggle a lot against champions who have gap closers who can jump right onto him and just burst him out when he is in range for him, and these picks right now are played a lot in the current meta. Right now you have picks like Aatrox, Camille, Yasuo, Jax, Riven, all those champions are being played a lot right now. And these tankier picks that Gnar tends to do pretty well against in solo queue just aren't being played a lot in the current meta. You just don't see a ton of tanks right now. You don't see a lot of the Cho'Gath, the Maokai, the Shen. I don't think I've seen like a Shen for multiple months in solo queue. So just overall, Gnar's matchups right now are very bad. Due to Gnar's passive, he's also a lot more communication reliant than most other champions. Just being able to time your rage for when a team fight is going to start, or just being able to communicate with your team when you want to start a team fight is a lot harder to do for solo queue, so he's just a much better champion for competitive play due to that fact. So at the number 7 spot here is going to be Trundle, and Trundle got a lot of nerfs due to the fact that he was very strong in the competitive scene a while back. He was a really good pick and a really good counter to a lot of the tankier champions in the jungle and in the top lane at the time, like Sejuani and like Cho'Gath. The fact that right now in solo queue, you just don't see a lot of tank champions being played in the jungle or in the top lane. You see a lot more damage focused junglers, a lot more bruiser top laners. It just makes Trundle a lot less effective. And then after the tank meta has kind of slowly faded away, Trundle just never really got any compensation buffs to bring him back up. He got some buffs to his Q to where they boosted the base damage a little bit again, and they also increased the AD ratio, but those buffs don't mean a ton because Trundle's not a champion you want to be building a lot of AD items on. He's usually a pick you build 1 AD item, 2 AD items max on, and then you do want to go tank, so he's just overall been nerfed too much and not really compensated at all. So number 6 here is going to be Mundo, and Mundo's another one of those champions that just gets destroyed by meta picks right now. Meta top lane picks are running Ignite a lot more. With the TP nerfs a while back and with Ignite getting buffed a while back, it just means that Mundo gets indirectly worse because you're just seeing way more top laners take Ignite now. Ignite just does a very good job at countering Mundo. It almost makes it so he doesn't even have an ultimate, and because he's a tank that does not have hard crowd control, if he's not able to soak a lot of damage in team fights with his ultimate, then he's pretty much just a useless champion. So just overall right now, the changes to the meta have not been very good for Mundo. So at the number 5 spot here is going to be Volibear, and Volibear has a lot of the same weaknesses that Mundo has, so he's a champion right now that just does not do very well in this current Ignite meta. You're almost seeing Ignite in 3 lanes every single game, and it makes it feel like Volibear doesn't even have a passive in a lot of situations. He's also a pick right now that isn't super good for the very early game focused jungle meta. He's a pick that doesn't clear super fast in the early game. He's also a pick that doesn't have the best ability to gank in the early game either. He's very reliant on his flash in order to pull off successful ganks, and when your flash is down with Volibear, especially once you reach the mid to late game, he's just a very predictable champion, and he's a champion that can just get kited out super easily because there's only one thing Volibear can really do, and that's just run straight at you, look for a flash Q, and then after that, you're kind of just sitting there in the team fight, auto attacking and hoping for the best. So the fact that he is very predictable, he doesn't provide a ton of consistent and reliable crowd control for his team, just makes him a pretty unreliable pick for solo queue. Number 4 here is going to be Azir, and Azir is a champion that has just been nerfed so much, and he's a champion that has been very hard to balance for competitive play and for solo queue. I feel like unless they do end up reworking Azir, he's always just going to be a very lackluster champion for solo queue. The amount of mechanical skill that you need in order to play Azir at an average level just doesn't make him really even worth picking up for most players. You're going to need so many games on Azir to be able to make him even a decent pick for solo queue. Right now, his early game is just way too weak for the current meta. A while back, it was in patch 8.3, he got a nerf to his Q, which increased its cooldown up to 15 seconds in the early game. Azir's ability to pressure in the early game, his ability to poke in the early game is just much weaker than it was before, and it's just much weaker than pretty much every other mid lane champion. So his ability to get priority in the laning phase, his ability to do well in like 2v2 skirmishes or 3v3 skirmishes is also really unreliable. If you place your soldier down in the wrong position, then you're just going to be a sitting duck a lot of the time, and you just have to really be able to play this champion at a high level in order to make him work. So number 3 here is going to be Ryze, and Ryze is a champion that is very similar to Azir because he's another pick that is just very hard to balance for both the competitive scene and for solo queue. Ryze's ultimate is an ability that, if used well and if communicated properly, is just such an amazing tool, but because you can't really communicate in solo queue, a lot of the time when you're using your Ryze ultimate, it's going to be to your detriment, and you're going to see Ryze players use their ultimate in mid to late game fights, and you're just gonna end up ulting your team into the enemy team. You're all gonna end up dying, and it's just gonna throw the game. So he pretty much doesn't even have an ultimate for solo queue. His early game, similar to Azir's, is also just too weak for the current meta right now. He doesn't really have the ability due to his mana constraints to really pressure a ton for the first few levels in the game, and it does take him a little bit longer to come online. He's a pick that is also a lot harder to micromanage than most other mid lane champions. The fact that Ryze is short ranged and you also have to be stationary to use your abilities just means that if you make one little miscue in a team fight, one positional error, then you're just gonna get caught out by a CC ability and you're gonna end up getting blown up. So number 2 is going to be Orin. Now with the changes in 9.1, a lot of people thought that he would get stronger and they would be some pretty nice buffs for Orin, but it's pretty much the exact opposite. Orin got even weaker with the buffs in quotation marks that he got for 9.1. The W shield removal there was just really costly for Orin. It makes his laning phase much weaker and he can't trade into the champions he used to be able to trade into in this patch now. Now his passive item buff are honestly very overrated as well. The fact that you can't upgrade those items until you reach level 13 and level 14 just doesn't make it that great. We're in an early game focused meta right now. The game is pretty much either won or lost by the time you reach level 13 or level 14, so those buffs there just don't really mean a ton and they don't mean as much as people are making them out to. And he also has pretty bad matchups. He gets destroyed right now by a lot of bruiser champions. Once a bruiser pick reaches 2 items, then Orin just cannot really do anything to them in the side lane. And then taking home the number 1 spot here as the worst champion in the game right now, at least in my opinion, is going to be Tahm Kench. So direct nerfs to Tahm Kench in season 8 just made him a very weak pick for solo queue. He's another one of those picks that is very strong for competitive, but when getting nerfed for competitive, it just really hurts Tahm Kench in solo queue even more. He got nerfs back in 8.16 to his W and to his Q, and these nerfs really hurt Tahm for solo queue. So they increased the cooldown of his W to 28 seconds at rank 1. This just means his early game is a lot more punishable. If he's going up against like any poke or range support, he's gonna struggle very hard in the laning phase. He's also pretty weak right now against a lot of the meta AD carries because, like I touched on earlier, a lot of the meta AD carries have some sort of gap closer or they have the ability to dodge out on CC abilities, for example Sivir's E, so he just overall is a pretty weak pick for the current meta. Tahm is also another pick that just relies a lot more on being able to communicate with his team in order for him to be at his highest effectiveness. With Tahm Kench's W, if you're not communicating with your AD carry and your AD carry's not telling you when you should eat them, then you're gonna see a lot in solo queue just Tahm Kench players eating their teammates when they don't really need to be, and they're just using it very poorly throughout the game. With Tahm Kench's ultimate as well, you can use it 10 times, or it can be 10 times more useful if you can communicate like with your jungler to set up ganks in the early to mid game. If you can communicate with your team to go for roams with it, it can just be so much better. So his kit just overall doesn't suit him very well for solo queue. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. Don't go too hard on me in the comment section if one of these champions is your main champion. Like I said before, you can climb with any champion in the game. However, I do think these champions are going to be the hardest to climb with and will take you the longest to climb with for season 9. With that being said though, guys, if you did enjoy this video, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. Also, if you do disagree with this list, then let me know down in the comments below who you would have on your list. But with that being said, guys, thanks for watching. Have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.